Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Then the Boat Painter, a relaxing look at life on the canals through the eyes of a humble boat painter. And you should just be able to make out in the distance, there we are, there's our boat. Work has well and truly begun now, and I'm hoping this morning to be able to put on our first coat of paint, which is a welcome milestone, let me tell you. But as early as it is, there's still a bit of condensation on the roof, so I'm going to give that a chance to dry out naturally before we do anything. And what better way to pass the time than the gentle stroll along the canal. And I'm walking next to the nearest lock, which we're going to be travelling through in a few days. And it just occurred to me, I haven't actually told you where we are yet. We are travelling north up the River Lee towards the River Stort in a beautiful place called Cheshunt. That was good timing, wasn't it? And what I like about this place is it sits within this beautiful network of lakes, which attracts a lot of wildlife, a lot of nature, a lot of plants. It's very nice actually. And what a beautiful morning this is, oh my God. So we're just going to have a little potter around and see if we can see anything, because there's no people around. So I think the animals should be in their element now. And wow. Look at this. Check this out, it's a Muntjak, very small deer, and look, it's stamping its little feet, look at that. And you do see them quite frequently here, but it's very rare that I've seen such a good view. Incredible, it looks very small, this was probably a young one. Look, and there is the mother. Wow. And she's eating nettles. And how on earth it doesn't sting the inside of her mouth is beyond me there, but incredible. I can't believe she hasn't seen me. I'm just stood on the bridge here. Usually as soon as they see you, they'll just scurry off. So although you see them quite often, it's extremely rare to get such a good view. Incredible. That was cool. We've been out for like 5 minutes. I've already had the best view of a muntjak I've ever had in my life. There are a lot around here, you hear them all the time, but you don't see them so much in the summertime because the vegetation is so dense. It's very easy for them to hide. You do see a lot more in the winter, I find, but I think, well, let's keep going, see what else we can see. Out into the open, I've looked to my right and now I can see a male muntjak, and there's the baby. And there's the mother. Wow, it's the whole family. Incredible. I've never seen this before. Usually you maybe see one on its own, but I've never seen a family. It's incredible. And he's chased everybody off. Oh well, better get back to work. Okay, so here we are back at the boat, ready to put on our first coat of primer. But before we do that, let's just have a look at the surface we're going to be painting and see how that rust treatment that we applied last week has got on. If we just cast our eye down, we can see that these areas which used to be sort of exposed rusty metal, they've now gone black. So that means that the rust treatment has worked effectively and it's ready to paint. But before we do that, I just want to give it a very light sand, just so the surface is a bit more abrasive, give it a keyed quality to it, so the paint's going to adhere a bit better. I don't want to remove any of the rust treatment material itself if I can help it. I just want to create a better surface for the paint to sit on. If you can see these areas here, there's just lots of little tiny rust spots. I haven't gone and individually treated those. I've just put the rust treatment over the whole area. I'd rather just apply the rust treatment to the metal if possible, but I mean, it's just impractical to do each of those spots individually. And, oh, it's a baby moorhen over there. Yeah, very nice. Where was I? Ah, yes, paint. So yeah, we've got a brush and a roller in which we can put our paint on. I'm actually going to use both for this task. Not in conjunction with each other, but we've got two separate areas, really. We've got this area which I'm standing next to now, which has a lot of rust all over it, really. So I think the best thing to do on this bit would be to get our roller and paint the entire area in one big block, rather than, you know, just go on individually and put lots of different patches of paint on, which is going to take a while and it probably won't look very nice either. You've got to start thinking about how smooth this surface is going to be as we're painting it. So we don't want lots of patches of paint. It's much better to have one smooth layer if we've got this many patches to deal with. However, on the other end of the roof, there's not much rust at all really, and there's just a few little patches here and there. So it'd be a bit of a waste of paint rollering on primer to areas that don't need it. You know, like this, there's no rust here at all. So on this section, I think it is acceptable just to get a brush and treat these little areas individually. So I'll just put a, you know, little bit of paint over that bit, again over here, and I think that'll be the best way to go about it. Oh hello, there you go, some cygnets over there, very nice. Ah, lovely. So the next thing to do would be to go and get my paint, my brush, my roller, and my breakfast actually, because I haven't had that yet. And then it will be time to put on our first layer of paint. So on we go with our first layer of paint, which is a welcome milestone indeed. Now, you may notice that I'm not using a roller tray, nor will I ever use a roller tray in fact. Instead, what I've done is, I've just slipped a little, what I call it, it's not like a miniature plank, it's like a little slat of wood resting inside the paint pot, and I can dip my roller in the paint. I can just sort of load the roller up with the paint by rolling up and down the wood. Any excess paint rolls back into the pot and I'm ready to go. And I don't have to keep on loading the roller tray with paint. I can just carry on and use the pot of paint throughout the whole process. So, you might notice that I have actually speeded this up to double speed, so I don't usually work this quick. Although there is a benefit to working quickly, so long as you don't splash paint everywhere, in that the quicker you work, as long as you can remain nice and neat as you're doing it, the paint does not dry as you are adding a fresh portion of paint and working it into the paint that you've already got on the roof. We're speeding up a little bit here, so this is obviously speeded up, and we're working quite neatly. We don't have to get too kind of serious about the method in which we are painting, although you will notice I'm very strictly rollering the paint on in the same direction from side to side, and this is going to have the benefit of, if we do create any marks with our roller as we're painting on, there will at least be some kind of uniform logic to the marks, and it will create a nice and neat layer of paint. And with the rollering done, it's now time to carefully step off the roof and get our brush out. So here we are, just finishing off our first coat of primer. And it's at this point we need to start thinking about things like drying time and temperature. And in episode 2 I mentioned that this primer has quite a short drying time, 4 hours, which means that on a day like today in particular, beautiful day, we could get, if we wanted to, 3 coats of primer done in the same day. And the advantage of that in this case would be that if it turns out to be this hot tomorrow, I would be able to put my first coat of undercoat on early in the morning before the roof heats up. And this is very hot. I would not, at this temperature, I wouldn't really want to put on a coat of undercoat, because the metal's so hot, the paint would start drying before we've had a chance to finish our roller strokes, and it would the surface would look really messy, and you wouldn't be able to get a smooth finish. And oh hello, it's that's a red darter dragonfly over there. Ah, there he goes. Where was I? Yeah, undercoat and temperature. Yes. So it just so happens that I've checked the weather forecast for tomorrow, It's not going to be too hot, so I'll be able to put the first coat of undercoat on tomorrow afternoon, which means I can chill out a bit. I only need to do 2 coats of primer today, and I can do my 3rd coat of primer tomorrow morning. And then it'll be drying time to do the first coat of undercoat at sort of midday or something like that. So we just need to finish this little bit off here, and then we can move up to, there's a mushroom vent over there, which needs a little bit of primer around the edge. So we'll do that after this. And, oh, that's a cinnabar moth, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. They're not that rare actually, but no less spectacular for it. Yeah, very nice. Okay, we've just finished that bit. And actually it's worth mentioning that I'm not doing, as you can see, a massively neat finesse job here. There's going to be like, you know, maybe 14 coats of paint on top of this. But when I put my 2nd coat of primer on here, I'm not going to want to have the edge at exactly the same place. I'm going to want to have the edge of the 2nd coat a bit further out, so you don't get this kind of obvious defined kind of edge to the primer when we put our first coat of undercoat on. Hopefully we won't be able to see the coat of primer under the undercoat, or it'll just be nice and smooth. Okay, I think that's done, and let's move up to the mushroom vent and finish that bit off. Okay, so here we are on our little mushroom vent. A bit of rust has formed around the edge of it, which is not unusual. There's a reasonably strong argument, I suppose, for taking the mushroom vent off, treating the rust, painting, and then replacing the vent once that's all finished. But in this case, I think we're just going to leave it on. It's quite old, some of the threads may have worn out, and I've had problems in the past where you've taken mushroom vents off and then I've not been able to put them back on again. No logical reason why that would happen, but yeah, I'm just going to make life easier and just leave it on, to be honest. I think also I will, because I can see a bit of a gap under there, I will reseal this once I finish painting, just to guarantee there's going to be no leaks. So it's probably all right, but you know, better safe than sorry. Oh, look, there's a comma butterfly over there. Very nice, one of my favourites actually. Very unique wing shape. Yeah, very nice. So yeah, last little bit for the first coat of primer. This is the last bit. I'm trusting that I'm not making too much of a mess here because I can't really see what I'm doing. Okay, now I just need to think of something to do while this dries for 4 hours, and then I can put the 2nd coat on, and that'll be all the painting done for today. And you know what? I've got a really good idea of what I can do for the next 4 hours. Okay, this should be a lot of fun. Well, certainly be more fun than watching paint dry. We have with us a brand new, unused inflatable kayak to play with. It's a birthday present from my loving parents, and I've been waiting for the perfect opportunity to get some air in it and give it a spin. And I think it's going to be particularly good for having a look at some of the little creatures that live in the reed beds at the side of the river there. So hopefully we'll get a really nice view of them. And away we go. Yes, this is fun. Amazing. I think we're going to be doing some longer trips in the kayak for sure, but this is just a little test drive, if you will. Going towards these reeds, see what we can see. And already I can see reed beetles. Now this is something you very rarely see if you're on the land. This is one of the big advantages of being in a little boat. You can see these kind of creatures that you wouldn't ordinarily see. Some blackberries over there. I think foraging blackberries with all the brambles in a inflatable craft is probably not the done thing. There's a soldier beetle crawling across the blackberries there. And we've got a harlequin ladybird, which I'm sure we will see more of as the episodes roll on. Very common to see around here. Turn around, go back the other way. Some more reeds on our left there. I'm sure we'll see something interesting in there. And indeed, yes, we've got a water ladybird. Again, very difficult to see on land. So, this is a lot of fun, I must say. We're going to go back to the mothership though, because, you know, I quite fancy just floating around all afternoon. But we've got that 2nd coat of primer to put on, and it's not gonna, this boat's not gonna paint itself, is it? So let's just dock to the mothership, or get out and have a think about actually doing some work. And here we go. So our first layer of primer is dried. We're going to have a quick zip across with the 180 grit sandpaper. We don't want to take any primer off if we can help it, but again we do need to key the surface in order that the next coat of primer is going to stick. Quick zip around with the tack cloth to get rid of the dust, and we're ready to paint. Up we go, hop gracefully onto the roof. Speed it up considerably than the last time, because I think you know the drill by now. I'll spare you the video footage of the third coat because, as you can imagine, it's much the same as this. Going around the edges and the odd patches of primer with the brush. And now we can start thinking about what to do now we've finished our 3 coats of primer. So we've just finished our 3 coats of primer on Scarlet, and we've given them a light sand with the fine sandpaper. And let me tell you, excitement is reaching fever pitch here because we are ready to put on our first layer of undercoat. Now on Scarlet, we're going to use this T-Mac undercoat, simply because there's so much of it, and we particularly want to put on a lot of coats of undercoat on Scarlet. It's a good time, I think, to talk about mechanical bond and chemical bond. So what are they? Well, we want the paint to stick to the surface of the boat as much as possible, of course. And there's 2 ways in which that happens. The first is by mechanical bond, the second is by chemical bond. And mechanical bond is what we create when we sand the surface of the boat or the paint we've just applied. So by creating that rough surface, that helps the paint stick. If you imagine this, my hands are 2 coats of paint. Rather than sort of do that, we are now got that kind of situation. So the fact it's not a flat surface and now it's kind of a bumpy surface with sort of vertical and horizontal edges, that makes the paint stick a lot better. Now, chemical bond is created by the inherent stickiness of the paint. So in particular, undercoat is stickier than top coats and the primers because we want it to help the protective top coat stick to the base layer of the boat as much as possible. And oh, there's that rat again there. It's difficult to concentrate because everywhere I look there's something going on. So yeah, chemical bond, yeah. We need to take advantage of chemical bond if we can. So if you imagine we've, say, paint our first coat of undercoat on, and then we leave it for like a week before we put on our next coat. So we've missed the opportunity to take advantage of the chemical bond of the paint, because as it dries over a number of days and gets drier and drier and drier, it loses its chemical bond. So if we can paint on the successive days or as close to the drying time as possible, we're going to benefit from that chemical bond. And with this Craftmaster undercoat in particular, it actually says that you don't have to sand in between coats as you normally would, as long as you paint on successive days, because the chemical bond of the paint is so strong, that's going to be enough to make the layers of paint stick together. However, on this T-Mac one, I was trying to find out about it. I'm not sure whether you can do that. So we are going to sand in between coats, but we're going to do each coat as close to the drying times as possible to take advantage of whatever chemical bond it may have. So in doing that, we'll still sand in between the coats of this, but I'm going to try and make sure I do successive coats as quickly as possible, so I can take advantage of the chemical bond as well as the mechanical bond that I've created by sanding in between coats. Okay, I think that's enough tech talk for one day. We've treated ourselves to a new roller. We did 3 layers of primer with the other ones, so I think that's had its day. And from here on in, I think we'll treat ourselves to a new roller for every coat of paint we do on the roof, because by the time you get to the end, it's just flattened out completely. It doesn't hold as much paint as it should really. So the only thing to do now is to get cracking and get on with our first layer of undercoat. And away we go. You will notice that as we are rollering this paint on, that when we are applying our fresh paint straight out the pot onto the roof, we're leaving a little gap in between the new paint and the existing paint. So we're never putting the roller down for the first time on a painted bit of roof. There's always a gap, and we're working in the fresh paint into the existing paint to sort of blend it in nice and smoothly. So we're doing it in quite a uniform way, probably putting a little bit more effort in than we were with the primer in terms of neatness. And it's great to see this roof one colour at last, and apart from the fact that it looks very nice and we can start to imagine what it's going to look like when it's finished, the fact that it's one colour means we get a much better idea of the severity of the imperfections that we need to sort out. I mean, we looked in particular at that very rough one, and some of the we added a little bit of filler around that one just because we had some filler left. But I don't think we're probably going to continue filling every imperfection on this roof. The fact that we're going to put on so many layers of paint is going to go quite a long way into smoothing those little imperfections out, and there's so many of them. It would just take so long. I mean, I don't think it's going to be practical. You could do it if you wanted, but in this instance, we're creating such a better look than what we had when we started. I don't think it's going to be worth it. And we're just finishing off the edges with a brush. I mean, we have a lot more control over what we do with the brush, so around the mushroom vents, along the edges, just to neaten things up properly and just make sure we don't put too much paint. If we were doing this with a roller, A, we'd have no control over what we were doing, and B, paint would be too thick, so it wouldn't dry properly and it would look very ugly. And that is our first layer of undercoat finished. Well, we're nearly at the end of a pleasantly productive day. Not the end of the episode though. We're going to start early tomorrow morning with our second coat of undercoat. It's just starting to rain a little bit, so I hope the weather holds out for tomorrow morning. I'd like to start early because it's good to make the most of these long days while they're still with us. Yeah, very nice. Check this out. Good morning, very early in the morning actually, and we can hear the birds singing cheerfully around us, and it's been raining overnight so the roof's very wet, and I'd like to start work pretty early if I can, and to help dry the roof out we're going to use our little wiper blade. We weren't going to dry the roof out completely, but by the time we come back from our breakfast I think we'll be able to start work. So, anything that doesn't dry off, I can just come back with the kitchen paper and do it properly. I'm going to give it a bit of a sand before we put our second coat of undercoat on. Use a bit of a rougher texture of sandpaper this time, maybe 120 grit. It's going to give it a light keyed surface for our paint to go on, but also if there's any rough bits of kind of semi-flaky paint left on, it'll help smooth them out as well. So the next coat's going to be a lot smoother, hopefully. And away we go. Not applying too much pressure with our sandpaper here, but if we do find any little rough patches, we'll just slow down and try and smooth it off as best we can. Going down the other side now. Although we're sanding the entire roof, it's still not a huge job if we're just giving it a light sand. Might even take something like 25 minutes perhaps. And a little quick zip across with the brush to get rid of any dust, and with the tack cloth to get it super clean, and we are done. Okay, so we've finished preparing the surface of the roof for the second coat of undercoat. We've dried, we've sanded, and we've dusted, and we're ready to put the second layer on. So we just gave it a bit of a light sand just to improve the mechanical bond of the surface. I think perhaps I could have taken full advantage of the chemical bond and not bothered sanding, as it felt like the paint was still a tiny bit tacky, so there's probably still some stickiness there. But the reason for sanding is not purely to improve the mechanical bond, but just to smooth the surface out a bit as well. Although we gave it a really rough sand to start off with, it's still not perfectly smooth. So you can see down here, hopefully you can see that the colour is not completely consistent, and this area was still quite rough, so I actually wanted to just to smooth it off a bit with the sandpaper. So I've had quite a good go at that with the 120 grit. You can see the dark grey of the primer coming through there, and as soon as I see that happening, I want to stop sanding because I don't want to remove any of the primer. What you may also notice is that the first coat of undercoat we applied has not completely covered the surface of the roof below, and you can still see the dark grey of the primer coming through, but that's okay. In fact, if we had created a completely consistent flat layer of colour that we couldn't see through, it probably means that we put the coat on too thick, which is going to cause it to not dry properly. So by the time we put on our second undercoat, however, we should have a nice flat consistent colour all over the roof. And you know the drill by now. I think that's a job for our speedy assistant who moves more than 12,000 times the speed of a normal human being. Okay, here we go once again. Not for the last time, of course. There's going to be plenty more coats of paint after this one. And although it can be quite a painstaking process, this is the nitty-gritty of boat painting. Patiently applying each coat until we achieve our desired finish. And speaking of desired finishes, I think this is an ideal time to start winding down and drawing this week's episode to a conclusion. But not before I've mentioned how appreciative I would be if you could connect with the channel in whichever way you please, be it liking, subscribing, or in particular commenting. And as is tradition round here, we like to end the episode with a bit of nature, and what better way to do that than rewind and have another look at some muntjaks, accompanied by the dawn chorus. And I'll see you all back at the boat in our next episode.